Good morning everybody, it's JPR, and as you can see from the title, today we'll be discussing a very serious topic that I've been asked about several times. Is Pokemon getting worse? Now, while most of you guys still like me, and to avoid getting anyone mad, I'll go ahead and answer that question. No, I do not think Pokemon is getting worse. If anything, I firmly believe that Pokemon is getting better and better for the most part. Now, we're not talking about the TV show, and we're not talking about the trading cards. This discussion is solely about the video games. So where does this question come from? Why do people think Pokemon is getting worse? Well, it most likely originates from Gen 1ers and other people blinded by nostalgia. Just the other day, I saw a comment so ridiculous, I had to do something about it. That commenter said, "I remember back when Pokemon were cool and weren't based on inanimate objects." Now, most people would reply by saying, but Gen 1 had Muk, Magnemite, and Voltorb, but you're cool with them? And while that is an excellent point, I'm here to back up the response even further. So according to the first commenter, apparently there are way more Pokemon based on inanimate objects today than in the past, right? Well, I actually took the time to scroll through the entire Pokédex to compare Generation 1 to the newer generations that people seem to hate for some reason, those being Gen 5 and Gen 6. And I'm here to tell you that commenter was dead wrong. After counting them up, I found that 32 of the original 151 Pokemon are based on inanimate objects. Now, some of them are arguable, like Ghastly and Lickitung. Are they a ghost and an animal, or gases in a tongue? So I didn't include them. Anyway, back to the stats. That means that 21% of all Gen 1 Pokemon were based on inanimate objects. So when you're traveling through Kanto, roughly 1 out of every 5 Pokemon you're gonna see is gonna be based on an object. Now let's look at the heavily criticized Generation 5, Black and White, which just so happens to be my favorite generation. Again, some Pokemon are debatable, but in Gen 5, 20 out of 156 Pokemon are based on inanimate objects, which is roughly 12%. How about Gen 6? 8 out of 72, which is even lower at 11%. And this isn't politics. You can't say, well, Candidate 2 would have won if he wasn't eating a peanut butter sandwich at the presidential debate. These are concrete stats, which means, if anything, the amount of Pokemon based on inanimate objects is getting smaller. And while I'm still on the subject, why do people hate Pokemon based on inanimate objects? I mean, I think Magnemite is much more creative than Seal, and he's probably a better Pokemon in the long run, too. His evolution might not look that great, but it still puts in work. Same thing goes for Honedge and Doublade. Their evolution Aegislash is arguably the best competitive Pokemon introduced in Gen 6, if Mega Evolutions aren't counted. Just because a Pokemon looks dumb doesn't mean it's bad. But no one cares that Gen 5 gave us the best storyline in a Pokemon game. No one cares that N is the deepest character in Pokemon history. No one cares that the game ends with an epic legendary dragon battle, and no one cares that we got awesome sequels instead of a cheap rehash to steal our money. All anyone cares about is that Gen 5 gave us a trash bag and an ice cream cone. Same thing goes for Gen 6. Gen 6 gave us 2 solid games with X and Y. Granted, I don't think X and Y were as good as Black and White, but because X and Y gave us a sword Pokemon and a keychain Pokemon, everyone likes to point their fingers and cry. How about Greninja? Zoroark? Excadrill? Pyroar? Haxorus? Friggin' Braviary? Oh yeah, no one cares about them. Mr. Mime is way cooler. I'll even admit, before Black and White came out, when I first saw the Korokoro scans for the new Gen 5 Pokemon, I was disgusted. I sided with the nostalgia fanboys, and I thought the games would be terrible. But when I actually played Black and White, they quickly became my favorite Pokemon games of all time. So my point is, don't just fall into the hate bandwagon because all the Gen 1ers are missing their Zubats. Which brings me to my second point. Before Black and White came out, I always thought that my favorite games would be Gold and Silver. Gen 2 is my childhood, it was filled with nostalgia, and nothing could ever beat it. Even though I still love Johto to this day, I'm not afraid to go back and go, wow, look, we had Hoothoot, Natu, Togepi, Elekid, Jumpluff, and so many more ball-shaped Pokemon. And just in case you forgot already, I love Gen 2. But did we really need all of these ball-shaped Pokemon? 1 or 2 is okay, but a whole horde of them? But despite that, I think Gen 2 is great because we fight a reformed Team Rocket, we have an awesome rival, we collect 16 gym badges, and we face the greatest trainer in the world. So my second point is very simple. Don't judge a generation on its Pokemon. Characters, locations, storylines, mechanics, take all of those into account. Why are Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire so much fun? Because it has the perfect amount of extra features, interesting characters, and secretive locations. So that's all I got. Hopefully you don't hate me now, and if I offended any of you, I'm sorry. This is just my opinions with some stats mixed in, so I can't really say too much about that. Anyway, thank you guys for watching as always. Be sure to rate, comment, subscribe, and I will see you guys next time.